Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The Shadow Legion moved with the silence of shadows, their presence undetectable to all but the most sophisticated sensors. Their mission, buried deep within the layers of galactic secrecy, was known only to a handful of high-ranking officials on Earth. Commander Alex Steele, a man whose calm demeanor belied the fierce determination within, led the team. His steely blue eyes scanned the holographic display before him, absorbing every detail of Zenith 9, a planet now under the control of the Crimson Reavers. Zenith 9 is key, General Harper had said during the briefing, his voice gravelly from years of command. The Crimson Reavers have turned it into a fortress, and their next move could ignite a war that would engulf the entire sector. Steele had listened in silence, absorbing the weight of the task. Now, aboard their stealth ship, he replayed the mission details in his mind as the ship slipped through the void of space, cloaked from any prying eyes. His team was the best humanity had to offer: Sergeant Maya Quinn, the brilliant tactician; Lieutenant Jake Hunter, a demolitions expert with a flair for improvisation; and Corporal Ivan Petrov, a sniper whose precision was matched only by his silence. The planet loomed ahead, a barren wasteland scarred by ancient battles and harsh weather. Zenith 9's atmosphere was barely breathable, filled with dust and debris from centuries of conflict. The Crimson Reavers had chosen their stronghold well, burrowing deep into the planet's surface where natural defenses and advanced technology shielded them from detection. "Prepare for landing," Steele ordered, his voice a low rumble that cut through the hum of the ship's engines. The team moved with practiced efficiency, donning their adaptive camouflage suits, state-of-the-art gear that allowed them to blend seamlessly into their surroundings. The suits were equipped with energy dampeners, making them nearly invisible to infrared and radar detection. Each member checked their weapons, compact but lethal, designed for close-quarters combat and long-range precision alike. The ship descended into Zenith 9's atmosphere, its stealth systems engaged to mask the entry. The landing was smooth, the craft settling into a concealed ravine miles from the Crimson Reavers' stronghold. The landscape was bleak, a wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling dust storms that obscured the horizon. "Move out," Steele commanded, and the team slipped into the shadows, their forms blending with the environment as they began the trek toward the enemy's base. The first sign of trouble came earlier than expected. Crimson Reaver scouts, more heavily armed than anticipated, patrolled the area. Their armor was a patchwork of alien technology, crude but effective, and their weapons glowed with a dangerous, unstable energy. "Hold," Steele whispered, raising a hand. The team froze, blending perfectly with the rocks around them. The scouts passed within feet of their position, unaware of the deadly force lying in wait. Steele waited until they were out of sight before giving the signal to proceed. The entrance to the enemy's stronghold was heavily fortified, just as their intelligence had predicted. Automated turrets and energy shields formed a nearly impenetrable barrier. A direct assault was suicide, even for a team as skilled as the Shadow Legion. "We go underground," Steele said, pointing to a barely visible crevice in the rock face. The entrance to an ancient tunnel system, long forgotten by the planet's inhabitants but recently rediscovered by the Legion's intelligence operatives. It was their way in, but it would be far from easy. The tunnels were dark, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of decay. The walls, once smooth and polished, were now cracked and worn by time. The team moved cautiously, every step measured to avoid triggering the traps that had been laid by the Reavers, or the ones left behind by the original builders. Quinn was at the front, her tactical visor scanning for threats. "Tripwire, 2 o'clock, she whispered, pointing out a nearly invisible line stretched across the path. Hunter moved forward, carefully disarming the trap with a few deft movements. "They've booby-trapped the whole place," he muttered. "Gotta love these guys." The team pressed on, navigating the maze of tunnels with precision. Occasionally, they encountered remnants of the ancient inhabitants, cryptic carvings on the walls, long-abandoned machinery, and even the skeletal remains of creatures long extinct. But the true challenge came when they reached the heart of the fortress. The enemy had not been idle. The tunnels were swarming with Crimson Reaver soldiers, and the team had to rely on every ounce of their training to remain undetected. Petrov took point, his sniper rifle fitted with a suppressor as he picked off guards one by one from the shadows. His shots were precise, each one dropping a target silently before they could raise the alarm, but as they moved deeper, the resistance grew fiercer. The Reavers were well-armed and well-prepared, their ranks filled with battle-hardened warriors who had faced countless enemies. The Shadow Legion found themselves in the middle of a war zone, outnumbered and outgunned, yet they fought with the determination of those who knew the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The climax of their infiltration came as they breached the inner sanctum of the fortress, a massive control room filled with alien technology, where the Reaver leaders were orchestrating their war plans. The room was a hive of activity, with holographic displays showing battle formations, troop movements, and the countdown to the launch of a devastating weapon aimed at neighboring star systems. Steele signaled for the team to spread out. Quinn moved to the control panels, her fingers dancing over the alien interface as she hacked into the system, planting viruses that would cripple the Reavers' communications. Hunter set his charges, each one carefully placed to cause maximum destruction when the time came, but they were discovered before they could complete their mission. An alarm blared, and the room erupted into chaos. The Reavers, realizing they were under attack, launched a desperate counteroffensive. Steele and his team were caught in a brutal firefight, forced to fight their way to the central command console where the Reaver leader, a hulking alien with a twisted face and cruel eyes, stood directing his troops. The final battle was fierce. Steele engaged the leader in a one-on-one duel, their blades clashing in a deadly dance. The alien was strong, but Steele was faster, his years of training and battlefield experience giving him the edge. Around him, his team fought with the same ferocity, their weapons cutting through the enemy ranks as they raced against time to stop the launch sequence. Hunter's charges detonated, rocking the fortress with a series of explosions that sent debris raining down. Quinn succeeded in shutting down the weapons launch systems, her hands moving faster than thought as she bypassed security protocols and disabled the targeting arrays. In the end, it was Steele who delivered the killing blow, his blade piercing the Reaver leader's chest and ending the battle. The alien slumped to the ground, his final breath a gurgling rasp as he realized his defeat, but there was no time to celebrate. The fortress, now crippled by the team's sabotage, began to collapse around them. Steele ordered the retreat, and the team fought their way back through the tunnels, emerging into the harsh light of Zenith 9's surface. Just as the fortress imploded behind them, the Shadow Legion made it to their extraction point, where their stealth ship awaited. They boarded in silence, each member reflecting on the mission's cost, the lives lost, the danger faced, and the knowledge that their victory, though significant, was only a temporary reprieve in a galaxy teetering on the brink of war. As the ship lifted off, Steele looked out at the planet below, now a ruined shell of its former self. "We did what we came to do," he said quietly, more to himself than to his team. "But the fight isn't over." Back on Earth, the debriefing was brief. The team's success had averted a major war, but the revelations uncovered during the mission sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of power. The involvement of shadowy alien entities behind the rebellion pointed to a much larger conspiracy, one that threatened the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. The Shadow Legion was commended for their bravery, their mission hailed as a triumph. But the accolades meant little to Steele and his team. They had seen the darkness lurking behind the rebellion, and they knew that the galaxy was far from safe. As they prepared for their next mission, each member of the Shadow Legion carried with them the weight of their experiences on Zenith 9. They had won the battle, but the war, the true war, was only beginning. And they would be there, in the shadows, ready to fight for the future of humanity, no matter the cost. The story ends with the Shadow Legion being called to another mission, their fates tied to the ongoing struggle for peace in a galaxy where danger and intrigue lurk around every corner. The Shadow Legion's return to Earth was met with little fanfare, as was the norm for their secretive operations. The debriefing was conducted in a sterile, windowless room deep within the heart of a military facility known only as the Hub. General Harper, who had initially briefed them, was present, his stern face betraying nothing of the immense pressure that now weighed on his shoulders. "Good work," Harper said, his tone flat as he reviewed the holographic reports. "Zenith 9 is secure, and the Crimson Reavers are no longer a threat. But what you've uncovered..." He trailed off, his eyes narrowing as he regarded Steele and his team. "This changes everything." Steele remained silent, his expression as unreadable as ever. The mission had been a success by all measurable standards, but the implications of the conspiracy they had stumbled upon were far-reaching. The shadowy alien entities pulling the strings behind the rebellion were an unknown factor, one that could destabilize the galaxy if not dealt with swiftly and decisively. "Your next mission will be even more delicate," Harper continued, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "We need to know who these entities are, what they want, and how deep their influence runs. You'll be going undercover, infiltrating the very heart of their operations." Quinn, always the strategist, leaned forward slightly. "Do we have any leads on where to start, sir?" Harper nodded, activating another holographic display. This one showed a star system on the edge of known space, a place where human and alien territories blurred into one another. "This is the Cora Vortex, a region notorious for its lawlessness. Smugglers, pirates, and worse operate freely there, and it's where we believe these entities have set up a base of operations. Your mission is to gather intelligence, identify their leadership, and, if possible, neutralize the threat." Steele glanced at his team, each member returning his gaze with a nod of understanding. The Cora Vortex was a place few returned from, but it was also where they were needed most. The galaxy's peace, fragile as it was, depended on their success. The briefing concluded with little else said. The Shadow Legion knew their roles, their responsibilities. There was no need for further discussion. They were professionals, each one honed by years of combat and clandestine operations. This was just another mission, albeit one with stakes higher than any they had faced before. Their ship, repaired and restocked, was ready within hours. The team boarded in silence, each member mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. As the ship ascended through Earth's atmosphere, Steele took one last look at the planet below, the blue and green orb that was home to billions of lives they had sworn to protect. He knew they might not return from this mission, but that was a reality they all accepted long ago. The journey to the Cora Vortex was uneventful, the crew settling into a routine of training, equipment checks, and quiet contemplation. The ship was equipped with the latest in stealth technology, ensuring that they would arrive undetected. But even the best technology couldn't guarantee safety in a place like the Vortex. As they approached their destination, the mood aboard the ship grew tenser. The Vortex was a region of space unlike any other, where gravitational anomalies and spatial distortions made navigation treacherous. It was a natural barrier, one that had deterred many would-be conquerors throughout history. But it was also the perfect hiding place for those who wished to operate in the shadows. Entering the Vortex in 3 minutes, Quinn announced from the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls. "All systems green. We're cloaked and running silent." Steele nodded, his eyes on the forward viewport where the swirling maelstrom of the vortex loomed. It was a sight few had seen and lived to describe. The vortex was a massive nebula, its core a churning mix of gas, dust, and debris, illuminated by the light of distant stars. It was beautiful in a way, a stark contrast to the danger it represented. "Hold course," Steele said, his voice calm. "We're looking for an opening." The ship's sensors probed the vortex, mapping out the safest route through the chaotic region. It was like threading a needle, each movement precise, every calculation critical. A single mistake could send them spiraling into the heart of the nebula, where even their advanced technology wouldn't be enough to save them. "Got it," Quinn said, a hint of relief in her voice as a safe passage revealed itself on the screen. "We're through." The ship slipped into the vortex, its shield straining against the intense gravitational forces. The crew held their breath as the ship was buffeted by turbulent waves of energy, but Quinn's expert piloting kept them on course. Minutes passed like hours, the tension thick in the air, until finally, the ship broke through into the calm beyond. "Clear," Quinn announced, exhaling the breath she'd been holding. "We're in." The Cora vortex was behind them now, and before them lay the uncharted territory where their enemies hid. The ship's sensors lit up with readings of nearby vessels, most of them small, fast, and heavily armed. Pirates, no doubt, scanning for easy prey. But the Shadow Legion's ship, cloaked and silent, slipped past unnoticed. Their destination was a large asteroid field, dense and sprawling, where intelligence indicated a hidden base lay. The base was rumored to be heavily fortified, protected by automated defense systems and manned by a coalition of alien mercenaries. It was here, within the heart of the asteroid field, that Steele and his team would find the answers they sought. As they neared the outer edge of the field, Steele gathered his team for a final briefing. The mission parameters were clear: infiltrate the base, gather intel on the alien entities, and if possible, neutralize the threat. But this time, they had to do it without being detected, as the enemy was far more powerful than anything they had faced before. "We go in quiet," Steele said, his voice low but firm. "No one knows we're here. We get what we need, and we get out." The team nodded, their expressions serious. Each knew the risks, but they also knew the importance of their mission. They suited up in their adaptive camouflage gear, checked their weapons, and prepared for the drop. The ship's docking bay opened, revealing the blackness of space beyond. One by one, they slipped out of the ship, using thrusters to navigate through the asteroid field. The massive rocks tumbled through space, creating a deadly obstacle course that would have been impossible for lesser soldiers to navigate. But the Shadow Legion moved with practiced precision, avoiding detection as they closed in on the base. The base itself was a sprawling complex built into the side of a massive asteroid, with hangars large enough to house dozens of ships and an energy shield that shimmered faintly in the starlight. It was a fortress, designed to repel any conventional assault, but Steele and his team were anything but conventional. Quinn was the first to reach the base, her visor displaying the security systems that guarded the perimeter. "Looks like standard automated defenses, plus a few surprises," she muttered, more to herself than the team. "But nothing we can't handle." She moved to a small access panel hidden behind a cluster of rocks, her fingers deftly working to bypass the security protocols. The rest of the team held position, weapons ready in case of an ambush. Seconds ticked by, each one stretching into eternity, until finally, Quinn nodded. "We're in." They slipped through a maintenance hatch, entering the base's lower levels. The corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of machine oil and metal. The base was quiet, but the tension was palpable. They were in enemy territory now, and one wrong move could mean disaster. The team moved silently through the corridors, their every step measured, their senses heightened. They had trained for years for moments like this, where precision and discipline were the difference between life and death. They passed through a series of checkpoints, each one more secure than the last, until they reached the heart of the base, the command center. The command center was a large, circular room filled with alien technology. Holographic displays covered the walls, showing various star systems, including Earth's. At the center of the room was a large, circular console, manned by a group of alien officers. These were not the ragtag rebels of Zenith 9, these were trained professionals, their eyes scanning the displays with cold efficiency. Steele signaled the team to hold position. They couldn't risk a direct confrontation, not here. Instead, they would gather the intelligence they needed and leave without being detected. Quinn moved to the console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she began downloading the data. The rest of the team stood guard, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. The download took only minutes, but it felt like hours. Steele's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. If they could gather enough information here, they could expose the alien entities behind the rebellion, potentially preventing a galaxy-wide conflict. But if they were caught, the mission, and possibly their lives, would be forfeit. Finally, the download was complete. Quinn gave Steele a nod, and the team began to move back toward the maintenance hatch. But just as they reached the corridor, a loud alarm blared through the base. "They know we're here," Hunter said, his voice tense. "We've got to move, now." The team broke into a run, their training kicking in as they sprinted through the base. The corridors were now filled with enemy soldiers, all converging on their position. The Shadow Legion fought with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their weapons cutting down any who stood in their way, but the sheer numbers against them were overwhelming. Steele led the charge, his blade flashing as he cleared a path through the enemies. The team moved as one, their movements synchronized and deadly, but the base was on full alert now, and the odds were growing worse by the second. As they reached the maintenance hatch, Steele realized they were out of time. The base's defenses were closing in, and there was no way they could all make it back to the ship. He made a split-second decision, one that only a commander could make. "Go!" Steele ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Get back to the ship." "That's an order." Quinn hesitated, her eyes meeting Steele's, but she knew better than to argue. The mission came first. She and the rest of the team slipped through the hatch, their forms disappearing into the darkness beyond. Steele turned to face the oncoming wave of enemies, his grip tightening on his weapon. He had no intention of dying here, but he also knew that the mission depended on him buying the team enough time to escape. He would make sure they succeeded, even if it cost him his life. The first wave of soldiers rushed forward, their weapons blazing. Steele moved with deadly precision, his blade cutting through armor and flesh alike. He fought with the fury of a man who knew that his death would mean nothing if the mission failed. The corridor was filled with the sounds of battle, the clang of metal on metal, the shouts of the dying, but even Steele couldn't hold out forever. The enemy was relentless, their numbers too great. As the last of his strength began to wane, Steele saw the faces of his team in his mind: Quinn, Hunter, Petrov. He knew they would carry on the fight, that they would succeed where he could not. In his final moments, Steele felt a strange sense of peace. He had done his duty, fought with honor, and given everything he had for the cause. As the darkness closed in, he allowed himself one last thought, that the Shadow Legion would continue, that they would carry the torch of hope and peace in a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos, and with that, Alex Steele, commander of the Shadow Legion, fell silent. The team made it back to the ship, Quinn's hands shaking as she initiated the launch sequence. The base exploded behind them, a fiery testament to Steele's sacrifice. The data they had gathered would change the course of the war, but the cost had been high. As the ship soared through the void of space, Quinn and the rest of the team remained silent. There were no words that could capture the loss they felt, the hole that Steele's absence left in their hearts. But they knew, as he had known, that the mission was bigger than any one of them. They had to keep fighting, had to honor Steele's memory by seeing this through to the end. The ship slipped into hyperspace, carrying the Shadow Legion and their precious cargo of information toward their next mission. The fight was far from over, but they would face it with the same determination and courage that had brought them this far. They were the Shadow Legion, the galaxy's last line of defense, and they would not falter, no matter the cost.